Hey, welcome to this edition of David Anderson Talking Market Data. And I'm talking market data to my two friends from Oracle. This is an unusual podcast in the sense we have two guests, Jason Murphy and James Calise. We will see how that plays out. But again, I think that we had a brief chat before we started this podcast, and we're going to talk about the journey to the cloud generically. We're going to talk about Oracle and the cloud. James has agreed to give half an hour presentation on Oracle's relational database history. No, he hasn't, because they're not talking about databases today, unless we talk about vector databases, which we'll come on to. So with that, I will put both Jason's and James' LinkedIn up, but I would ask now if let's start with James, just to give us a little bit of background, how you came to be sitting here, why you're sitting here, why Oracle is sitting here. Lots of whys.
Sure. Thanks, David. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat here today. So looking forward to a great session. So the quick intro, the high level, the 1,000-foot version of this. So I'm the technologist here. I come with a background of 25 years plus of just being in the technology field, whether implementing, building, consulting, supporting systems, and then ultimately leading product design and development here at Oracle, and now leading a pre-sales engineering team. Yes, Oracle's been through a transition, and I've had the pleasure of seeing it all. It's my latest tenure at Oracle I've been here 17 years in total. The last 10 has been focused on OCI as we pivoted from a longstanding relational database company to an apps company, and then into a cloud company where we are today. So I lead a team of engineers that are focused solely on our cloud business, and really focusing on where we started from, financial services industry. So building and delivering cloud services and capabilities that are tailored towards our financial services customers. Our journey to cloud, and we'll talk a lot about how we differentiate throughout the discussion today. But what we really decided to do 10 years ago when we were building our cloud was build a cloud that was focused on enterprise capabilities and needs. That starts at the heart of everything that we've done at Oracle since the inception back in 1977, security at the heart of everything we do. Like, our first customer was the NSA. And so, like, that as a foundation, security, and building a cloud that's focused on security, and building a cloud that delivers security features at no cost because you just need to have security in the cloud, was a key design decision for us. The second design decision was really focused around enterprise-grade performance, meaning not only top-level performance, but consistent performance. So there's no concept of a noisy neighbor. There's no concept of, I have to worry about what's happening with another customer running in our cloud. I need a consistent top-end performance platform for me to run my mission-critical enterprise applications. And that's what we focused on at the start 10 years ago. And as we've evolved and delivered more capabilities and continue to expand our cloud, it's set us up for success in two key areas today. I mean, it's the intersection of the conversation today. One, we found is capital markets. Like, from a financial services business standpoint, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've spent the time to focus on the capital markets business because performance matters. Milliseconds, microseconds, nanoseconds. How do I run in the cloud and get a consistent performance experience with all the security needs that the enterprise has? That's where we found that we actually have true differentiated value to offer those customers. And that's also set us up for success when it comes to AI and delivering AI infrastructure and, the layers on top of it from large language models and various AI services and capabilities. So capital markets, AI, this is where Oracle shines. And on that journey over the last 10 years and getting there to financial services and capital markets, that's where I got to meet Jason. And we crossed paths at one of your events, David.
Well, exactly. As I said, you owe me a recruitment fee, so I will collect at some point.
Absolutely. And I was like, this is one of the smartest guys I've met. He knows it inside and out from the business. We got to get him talking about...
And dashingly handsome as well.
No question.
You guys, come on. Please.
That goes without saying. So we had to up the level of the team, just overall look, but we had to up the level of our team. And, our focus on capital markets is bringing in the right talent and bringing in people that really know the business itself, can have the right level of conversations. So that brought Jason to us.
Okay. A quick question before we go into Jason's background.
Yeah.
I mean, is it fair to say that Oracle was a slightly late starter in this race? In the sense that sort of likes of AWS and Google and even Microsoft. But I would say my impression externally is that almost gave you an advantage. There was a disadvantage in the sense they had maybe some of the brand visibility earlier on, but you got to learn from some of the early mistakes maybe they made. Is that a fair...
Very true. Yeah, very true. That's really, we started our journey to the cloud sort of top down, building out an application and SaaS business. Like that's where it started for us back in like 2009, 2010. Our competitors started from an infrastructure business, and an infrastructure business focused on delivering, web applications. So a very different starting point, a very different approach and thought process around, hey, how do I enable businesses to run their applications online? So when we came top down, we came at it from an enterprise perspective. So our late mover advantage really starts from starts with this idea of like, who are we focused on as our customer base? We had, 35, 40 years of history related to running mission critical applications. We run ERP. So the general ledger, your back office, systems globally distributed. We've been running for 10, 20, 30 years. We needed to build a cloud that could run those applications.
Yeah.
We saw that our competitors had solved let's run the net new container-based web application that is customer facing. That was their business. Ours was, how do we actually bring the mission critical backend applications? How do we bring the enterprise class applications that need the performance, that need the security? So we took on a different approach, and we really built a cloud ground up differently. That sets us up, again, like I said, for these advantages today where capital markets are now taking advantage of capabilities they just haven't found in other clouds. AI capabilities that we're delivering from these massive hyperscale GPU clusters. You just can't find or build with these other clouds. They didn't build their cloud in preparation for it. I mean, they're always improving and they're retrofitting and they're doing things, but as a fundamental for us, this is where, what we focus on. So I think that's the difference. It's sort of like when you do something as a fundamental, it permeates everything in the stack. So that's what we do at our baseline position. Our North Star is like, we need to run mission critical applications. And from there, the dominoes fall, the benefits sort of cascade to the class of applications we talk about in capital markets, market data delivery space.
And Jason, I mean, I met you at Exegy, and that's where you were presenting at one of the engineering streams in New York, and that's where James nabbed you. And you made the conscious decision. I mean, tell us a bit about your Exegy journey and your market data journey, but then tell us about the decision to join Oracle.
Yeah. So David, thanks for having me. I think we've been trying to set this up for like nearly 5 months now, I think. But between all of our travel schedules, that's not how it works. So I'm really happy to be here today. So I spent, I'm a product manager. I think James is on some level too. So I've been doing product for say 13 years now, and that really started at Exegy. Right. I helped build out some of their internal tooling for their change management. I mean, Exegy has so many appliances deployed worldwide, not Oracle cloud level, but many, many appliances. And we had to build a system that really managed that. So I started there. That got me into how these systems operate and how these market data trading systems have to fit into banks on a security level, on a change management level, on an understanding of what's coming next for your next EDC. And then I got lucky enough with friends there to move into building and recording systems. So their classic XCR that's in many, many banks today, that's, out there recording in some cases to the cloud, recording market data for replay and for, algo training. That was sort of mine. So again, now I'm even deeper into the data of how it works. Got to spend about a year working with FINRA to build the CAT data pipeline. Exegy supplied that for many, many years. And through all of that, I think I met you and spoke at a couple of events, and then I think James and I may have traded questions back and forth off stage and on stage. And then I think we sat on a panel together at some point. So, we met that way. And I think that's sort of part of the point of FISD, right? Was meet other like-minded market data technical people, go have a good time and learn from each other. So that's
then poach them from other firms like James.
Well, I mean, you can't say that out loud, but it's just called networking, David. That's what we have to do.
I know. I mean, that's the reality. It's healthy. It's healthy poaching.
And while at Exegy, I worked with both GCP and AWS and have good friends on both sides that are building out competing systems to what we're doing here, right? But I also met Oracle. And when I looked at the technology that Oracle has, especially on sort of the back-end RDMA network, I saw a group that they didn't know it yet, and they may not all of them still know it, but they were building something that was very close to what many of these trading systems need. They were doing the data volumes and the movement of data at speed and at reliability that the banks and the hedge funds require. That's not something the other clouds were definitely doing at the time and aren't really even doing now, right? They're getting there, but nobody has an entirely baked out RDMA network sitting on the back that we do, that we can just sort of plug in and share between 1,000 cores or 5,000 cores. That's not something the other clouds have. And so when I was sort of looking for what to go do next, I didn't really want to go join an exchange, and I had been trying to push Exegy and others to use the cloud for market data. And honestly, I picked the cloud that I wanted, and I called a friend, and that's a story over cocktails of how that actually worked out that way, which is fun. But here I am, and I couldn't be happier. I've been here for about a year and a half now.
So I mean, you've got, as we've alluded to, I mean, I think my perspective from the outside was, I think AWS, well, they were probably first in the cloud anyway, generically, but they were the first people in the sort of financial services, then Google hot on their heels. Microsoft, you probably can't say this, but I would say this, slightly unusual. I don't really see them in this main cloud infrastructure conversation. They, they're big on this Copilot and their relationship with LSEG, and the desktop's very important to them. But again, I'll start with Jason. You're the newbie, then we'll go on to James to fill in the gaps. I mean, what differentiates Oracle cloud infrastructure, and maybe being more generic, rather than to make this a sales pitch for Oracle, it's more like what are the generic issues that the capital markets face, and then how do you solve them better than maybe somebody else does?
Let me disagree with you on one point about where the clouds came from, right? So AWS, why did AWS have a cloud? AWS had a cloud because Jeff Bezos needed infrastructure to run Amazon. He found Andy Jassy, who did a damn good job doing it, right? Andy built technology for their internal systems. And then one or two of them or both of them said, I could sell that to someone else. Google wasn't far behind. They already had similar technology existing. They had to have
a search engine, which was
right. And honestly, Microsoft's the same way. Microsoft, to try to get Desktop 360 going, had to already have that infrastructure there. James said it a minute ago. Oracle built an enterprise class app system first, right? And from there said, wait, we can probably do what these or others are doing. And to the differentiator piece, we can do it in a way that enterprises trust. And we can go in, because we're the late mover, we can go in and say, what would you guys wish you did differently? What budget would you have had? What technology do you wish you would have thrown to the side? And how would you build it now, 10 years into a cloud, the cloud example, I guess, or the cloud movement? How would you build it differently? And that's the cloud Oracle bill. So what do capital markets do from this? Well, so back to my examples of market data. 9 years ago, I was looking for historical market data to help Exegy build systems. We had to go buy data from companies because it wasn't well recorded, and where it was recorded, it was stored on AWS, right? So where capital markets started with a lot of this was, give me storage off-prem that I'm not dealing with all of the management and hard drive failures and everything we all know from dealing with infrastructure. Next place capital markets got into it, and a place that Oracle's quite well placed for it, is modeling, right? They're just CPU intensive. Do you need to run and manage and have an IT team that is available to you to run huge compute loads for your Monte Carlo simulations? You can do that. And many banks did throughout the 2000s. And I think where they realized is they can change their cost model by not having an on-prem team, not worrying about lifecycle management of hardware, not worrying about any of that, and allow someone else to manage it, and it just be a service your teams use to go.
But a couple of quick thoughts. You've talked about storage, where maybe this all started out. Then you went on to compute power.
Yeah.
But isn't the interesting discussion in the market data area distribution throughput? So you can store your data, you can do lots of calculations on the data, but then you've got this need to actually get the data from A to B and then B to C and super fast. I mean, James, let me switch to you. Yeah. I mean, what questions do you get asked when you're going in and talking to these big investment banks, big buy-side institutions, hedge funds, whatever? They probably ask you different things. But I mean, from a market data perspective, where does the conversation typically go? What are the sort of key questions, key things they want to find out from you?
So there's two key ones I'll start with, and Jason, you'll fill in the blanks for me. So I think it goes in the first one is sort of at the heart of like to your initial ask, David, of like what differentiated us. They ask us about the network. That's what they want to understand first. And that was at the heart of our design. Like, so when Jason mentioned, right, this, in the late mover advantage, we built our cloud. We started as a skunkworks project. We hired a whole bunch of engineers out of Azure and AWS, and we said, hey, go rebuild the cloud based on what you've learned. And this happened in Seattle. back in 2015, 2016. And just to give you a perspective too, to the audience here around the importance of this change and why we're a cloud company and not a database company, David, is Clay McGurk, our CEO. When I started in OCI in 2016, he was the head of engineering. So what a rise and focus for him, where he went from head of engineering to CEO of this company in a 10-year span approximately. So, and I'll base it on the fact that day one design decision was network is the fundamental that we have to solve for. So to build a network that is going to have basically no barriers, no concept of network congestion, connectivity is going to be open. We think about that internal within our cloud regions, but also external when leaving our cloud, and thinking about we want to make it as easy to sort of get into our cloud and get data out of our cloud. So that was like the fundamental decision of how we're going to build our cloud. We're going to start network first and build out from there, because that's the backbone. That's the nervous system of how everything connects. It's compute, it's storage, it's AI services, and it's anything and everything else above it. It starts with this network. And we talked about in 2016, 17, 18, 19, like second generation cloud and the second generation networking approach that we built, where there's just a different physical connectivity that exists in our cloud that you find in other clouds. We've actually pivoted that in the last year. Now we're onto our third generation, which is now giving, this idea of multiple networks, multiple physical networks, all interconnected at the same time, and giving you multiple pathways for compute to talk to storage, or compute to compute, or GPUs to talk to GPUs. And this is our multi-planar network design, and I'll save all the technical details and jargon for follow-ups. But the fact is that we've continued to evolve, and network is at the heart of what we do. So the hedge fund capital market space, the market data companies are coming to us. Network is the first question. Explain it to us. Why are you different? Why don't I have to worry about TikTok on your cloud and the stream rates going up there, overnight? How is that going to impact me? It's, how we built our network to solve for that, to dedicate bandwidth, to dedicate performance to you on the network side. And then the second one, and I think this will evolve into a bigger discussion around like the importance of cloud, but it's resiliency.
Yeah.
Again, when we think about mission critical systems, and markets are a mission critical system. If we can't have markets go down, we can't have, we can't miss a trade, we can't miss a bit of information. So resiliency is the second part of that conversation, because I think that's been the biggest stress point in the last 2 or 3 years, as all clouds have scaled up. There's and outages have become more magnified. We see this as now, a geopolitical tool, where cloud regions are now, part of the bigger story of like, what should we go after from a war standpoint? It's mission critical infrastructure, and resiliency becomes at, the heart of the conversation with, on the, how do I deploy my applications in a highly available, resilient way? But then also, how do I think about multi-cloud and providing resiliency across all of my different cloud environments?
I'm going to throw a question there, because to be honest, I've set you up a bit talking about how you compare and contrast with other cloud providers. But arguably, your biggest competitor is on-prem, on-premises. In other words, I got the impression that an awful lot of these, traditional firms, it wasn't which cloud do we go for. It was, we rather want, for things like resilience. And again, I was looking this up recently. Is it deterministic throughput? Because I remember, one of the things that I started out in Triarch, RMDS, Tret World. It's all well and good to have very low latency, but if you're very low latency 90% of the time, but then 10% of the time you're really slow, then it's pointless that you've got that 90%. It's that consistency. I don't know if is consistency the same as resilience? I don't know from a technical point of view.
You need it's stability, really, right? You
Stability.
Don't need jitter. Yeah, you don't want jitter in your lines. You want to know that when we say you're going to get X or Y bandwidth, that's what you get, regardless of whatever else is going on with you, with your other systems, with whoever else is running in the same data center as you.
Which is exactly James's point, isn't it? And,
right.
Yeah.
I would add, James, so I would add a third actually to what you said. I would add location. So one of the questions we've had a lot from many clients is, where are you? Are you in New York? Are you in London? Okay, those are the easy answers. But what smaller markets are you in? Are you in Brazil and where? Are you in South Korea? Which data center? Are you in Saudi? Which data center? Because that matters so much with access to market data, right? Where you actually are, how far it has to go, where they have their hardware. And if they want to move to the smaller markets, do they want a data center space? Do they want to deal with that or not? Right. And that's one of the advantages we've had is the size of our cloud being what it takes to put a cloud in is different than others. And so we've been able to go into many, many more of these small markets. So it's a frequent first place we'll go in with is we can get you places others can't because of our scale.
But how do you, in a sense, compare to a big data vendor? I used to work for Reuters. It's now LSEG Data and Analytics, Bloomberg. I mean, effectively, they have a network. A network. They may plug into you a bit here and there, but in a sense, they would be selling their network. And then you've got an entity that I was very familiar with, BT Radiance, which I think is now Waypoint, they call themselves. But that was like an extranet. Again, it was a network, to James's point. So how did the cloud providers compare and contrast with a big data vendor like Bloomberg or LSEG Data Analytics and an extranet like Radiance, now rebranded Waypoint?
In the sense of like connectivity and how we get to places?
Well, yeah, only in the sense I was just picturing that in a sense they would argue they have a network.
Yeah.
They did have a network, but then cloud has come in the last 10 years. And the question is, does cloud replace that in some way or complement it or what?
You asked the key question. Replace, enhance, replace maybe. We do have, I have friends who are in the market data space who are asking me about global data movement, right? Can we use Oracle's backbone to move data in and out of smaller regions around the world because the extranet providers are expensive to get into those locations? But because we want to run a full-fledged cloud, not just a specialty cloud in these locations, we've had to build in the bandwidth and the redundancy in that bandwidth to get to those locations. So replace, probably not. Supplement in the right places, most definitely.
James, I'm throwing this back to you. Jason and I have probably worked in the quote-unquote market data industry for a bit longer than you. I've worked in it for an awfully long time. But I mean, we're special. Market data is special. Special people, special situation, need to be dealt with in a special way. I mean, I don't know. Are we special? Are we unusual? Are we quirky? Is that a difficulty or an opportunity for Oracle?
It's an opportunity. So quirky, for sure. Clicky a little bit. I mean, that was probably early days was just sort of, understanding who was who and who didn't like who and who was sort of frenemies and all of the things going on. So I'm always good for gossip. So I was like, this is great. It's right up my alley. I'm just going to try to, lean on the people that are in the know and get the story here and navigate it. It's aligned well to us again because it comes back to like the quirkiness is the demand for performance, the demands for resilience that come out of these applications. And I think again, it's at the heart of what we do at Oracle. I didn't find it to be a challenge. I found it to be like I was like, wow, okay, this is a group and a community that wants to talk about the same things that we want to talk about. In that. How do we secure this? How do we keep this up and running? How do we build, 5.9 systems with 24/7 availability? How do we get there from a cloud infrastructure standpoint? And this from a cloud infrastructure, competitive landscape, it just wasn't a place that our competitors were going. There's enough business and enough opportunity elsewhere. This was the spot that we carved out. And then it was just sort of a match for us in terms of finding capital markets and market data and then having these discussions about really how we've built things differently. And I know, David, we've talked about it a bunch. I think it was sort of the biggest hurdle, I would say, was overcoming the hype and disappointment cycle that kind of happened with cloud. Because if you remember, when I came to the FISD discussions initially, it was like, oh, we've been talking about cloud for 5 years and it didn't work for us. And I was always like, no, we've got something different. You haven't heard from us. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think that was sort of the match for Oracle in general and with this community and solving some of these key problems that, yes, the quirky market data community has, but we've built the cloud to help solve them best.
You're as quirky as we are. You've joined the quirkiness, so that's simple. I mean,
Yeah.
my impression of the cloud journey generally was that a lot of entities said we're in cloud, but they were putting non-real time data. They tick histories, and that storage was a really powerful part of the cloud story. But I think the one struggle was, we're talking about exchanges, we're talking about ultra low latencies, getting data from an exchange. And somebody said to me that we won't be able to say we've got exchange data in the cloud until we have matching engines sitting in the cloud. And let me add one other little comment on that somebody else said to me. The crypto exchanges all started out in the cloud. That's where they started.
Yeah.
So I don't, I don't know who to believe half the time on this. Help me out.
That was actually gonna be my response about the matching engines piece. It's like, cool. Would you like that crypto exchange or that crypto exchange's matching engine? Because they sit in the cloud, right? I think what they mean is some sort of one of the big exchanges, NYSE, LSEC, somebody putting a specific matching engine in the exchange or in the cloud that is only meant to run there. And I don't think we need to do that. And I don't think that's a barrier to saying market data is in the cloud, right? There is market data flowing across probably all the major cloud vendors today in one form or another. Live. Is it ultra low latent? Of course not. That's okay. Right. I don't take any offense at, when someone says, well, you're not doing real market data because you're not doing ultra low latency. Right. If I did, I would have been as Exegy as long as I was, because what David Taylor built there. That was FPGA first. That's what Laurent Arnault came in to do. And you're putting FPGAs on a switch, right? That is not what we're going to do in a cloud. Right. But that's also not most of the trading that happens in the world.
It's a tiny part. Horses for courses, isn't it? And the low latency, the ultra low latency are very specialist horses, which most people don't ride.
Right. And you talk about the clicky nature of this. When you get into the ultra low latency guys, that is a special breed of people that do an amazing, there are some brilliant people that do it. And I'm going to let them continue to do it. Right. I'm not going to try to join that club. I know them, I'll have a beer. That's great. But I think as far as live market data in the cloud, there are trading systems in the cloud all over. LSEG you can go get live market data right now from LSEG. You can go get it from, IEX had it for a long time out of the cloud. It's not a new thing there. It's a matter of the volume of how much is there, how live it is, where your latency actually sits, and then what it's being used for, right? Is it being used for training? Is it being used for actual live trading, and by who, right?
Let's segue, and I don't think we're going to forget the cloud conversation, because I think we'll pull back into this. But my suggestion how we take the conversation next is we go into a bit of an AI. Have you heard of AI? It's artificial intelligence, in case you hadn't worked that out.
It's becoming a thing. But only,
few people are talking about it. So we'll talk about that. But I was going to also ask about regulation to do with cloud, but should we use regulation at the end and government intervention about both AI and the cloud? Yeah. So let's segue. My perspective is, and I said to this you guys offline, AI is great, but it sort of evolved out of the cloud. The cloud was an enabling. Brendan Carley, who was one of my first podcast hosts, said, look, we were talking about AI when he was at university in the 70s, showing how old he is. I was in university in the 70s as well. And basically, he said, we understood it, but the compute power, the processors couldn't cope with it. And then, the internet and the cloud, these were all stepping stones that have led to AI. And now all we seem to be talking about is AI. So again, the Oracle perspective, from a market data, AI, we could have 3 weeks of podcast on this, and people do. But specifically in the market data arena and where you're coming from, from Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, what's the role of AI? Where does AI fit into all that? James, kick us off. I've heard enough from you, Jason, so I'll come.
It's the capacity enabler. I think that's the intersection point, and really the acceleration point. If you look at some, AI has been around for a very long time. The discipline around it, from the mathematics side of it, has been 60s and 70s. This was being worked on. there's hedge funds that you could look at, and they've probably they've been accumulating data sets, as far back as the 80s, and doing some form of, machine learning, maybe some idea around large language models, sort of understanding around market data patterns, and, moving away from just the idea of trading off fundamentals and really trading off of like what's happening in the market right now, and looking for the edge there. So it's happened in pockets, but the acceleration point didn't come to be until, like, how do you scale this, and how do you actually get it to, in the hands of the consumer? I think, even tying back to your last question, David, around like, where the growth is happening from a market data standpoint, and, sort of like the moving beyond the ultra low latency to, 90% of the other use cases. You and I as traders, you and I as, having agents now running, some, trading algorithms for us, it's pushing more and more to the edge and to the consumer where the data needs to live. So like market data in the cloud, again, cloud is the enabler of delivering the capacity and the capabilities to me, to you, to all of your listeners. So now it's in your hands. It's not behind the four walls of a large hedge fund that has the resources and has the ability to go and to build out and manage the infrastructure and then build the algorithms on top of it. So it's really this cloud is the ultimate democratizer of availability of compute resources and capacity, and AI is the gasoline we're pouring all over it, because the things that you and I can do with it, the only limit is our imagination. So that's the power right now.
I'm going to throw a contrary point, only because I've been listening to a couple of podcasts, generic ones. And one of the conversations has been, we're watching all these data centers being built everywhere. And maybe we're going to have them on Mars and the moon if Elon Musk has his way or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, in a sense, these data centers are the cloud. I mean, they're just making the cloud a bigger cloud and what have you. But then people have said, well, hang on. What about if you ran these large language models actually locally? If you could do stuff more locally, which I suppose is a counterpoint. I mean, when computers started out, they were local, and then you had servers that were created, and then the step beyond that is into the cloud. But could we have a reversal where people say, well, actually, I want to have everything local or personal? I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along. It may be a silly comment, but I've heard people say it.
Here's why it's not. We were just at our sales kickoff 2 weeks ago, and one of the key topics we had was AI at the edge, right? Where the decision is getting made, where the software is actually running. Does it need to be closer to where the action is happening? So if you're talking about an agent is something that takes action. Does it need to sit closer to the thing taking action? Also, does the size of the model that is doing the inferencing need to be that large? Right. So if we talk about GPT or Claude, these are huge models that are meant to do very, very general things. But in market data, we've been doing machine learning for 15, 20 years now, right? Those models were not nearly the scale of large language models because they didn't need to be. They were specialized. So can we use more specialized models to do one action at the edge? Probably. I push my customers to use the smallest model that you can to get the result you need. Because if you keep chasing the next biggest model, you're just chasing price going up. You're not chasing functionality if you don't actually need the functionality. Right.
So James, with Oracle, and again, this is me showing my ignorance here. I use ChatGPT from OpenAI, then there's Anthropic, Perplexity. I use Gemini as well, and Gemini does clearly sit within the Google world. So Gemini is their baby, but OpenAI, ChatGPT, and Anthropic, they're not part of a cloud empire, are they? I mean, sorry, where do the different players fit in? I mean, is one of you big cloud operators going to? Well, I don't think you could afford a sort of OpenAI or Anthropic, but where is this all going? The relationships between these different entities.
Yeah, I think. I mean, from our perspective, right? We're focused on staying in our lane and in doing so, really nailing the deliverable of being the best infrastructure provider to run any and every model. So we don't have any designs or focus on acquiring nor building our own large language model. Our core competency is at the fundamental level is the best network, the best GPU and CPU infrastructure to run on that network, the fastest storage, and then this ability to build regions at scale that no one else can. So that's the lane that we want to play in. So we're working feverishly to enable every single model on Oracle Cloud, with OpenAI being the latest entrant and being able to deploy and run that in our cloud infrastructure. And we give you access to Gemini and Anthropic's right around the corner, plus, a whole host of, open source models that you can bring your own and run on our infrastructure. And I think that plays into the concept of AI at the edge, is I think one of the key, and to come back to some differentiators is on Oracle, our ability to build regions gives us this unique capability now to build sovereign AI regions. As I think regulatory demands that we'll talk to at the end, the worry from a financial institution standpoint. There's a bank that I work with here in New York. They're generally considered the leader in AI from a financial institution standpoint. They run everything on-prem. They don't do anything in the cloud. And security concerns, data leakage to the model, what are we, token utilization and cost escalation, how do they control all of that? They deploy it locally. We give you that ability from a cloud provider standpoint. So we can build a region for you. We can deploy it where you want. We can keep it private for you. And I think that's, when we talk about what are we going to do different over the next, 1 to 5 years as we continue this build out of infrastructure, I think it's going to go down the path of smaller, focused regions that are customer specific, country specific, government specific, that are going to be completely walled gardens. They're going to have access to the models that they want, but no one can see what's going on behind the four walls that are put up there. And that's where we're uniquely positioned to succeed.
So are you selling the picks and shovels that the gold miners are using? Is OpenAI and Anthropic, are they the gold miners and you're sitting there selling them barrows and the tools? I mean, I don't know if I'm mixing the metaphor terribly, but it's trying
I don't know, Jason. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right?
I hear where you're going. Yeah. I mean, if we want to stay in our compute, I mean, GPU times a premium, right?
Yeah.
Finding access to the newest GPUs to do your training or your inferencing on is like finding the right kind of gold. I mean, if you call and ask, you don't get it in most places, right? So you've got to get in the right spot. And right now that demand is continuing to increase, which is why we're seeing the feverish pace to build data centers as much as we can. We'll see how that goes over the next couple of years. I know Oracle's got a lot of data centers yet to build, and we're gonna get them done. That's not going to be a problem.
It's your fault that I'm sitting in 38 degrees here in London because you're destroying the planet. Sorry, we won't go that route, but I couldn't resist saying that. Data centers.
I thought I was ruining the world for other reasons. It's okay.
Yeah, we'll forgive you for that. Sorry, I broke the line. I mean, so as I understand it, I mean, again, I was doing a bit of research beforehand, and asking about Oracle, it mentioned this concept of vector databases. And again, as I understand it, in a way, you are doing stuff with data, if you can put it into a vector database, or in any way do something with the data that makes it more usable or accessible by AI. And again, I always struggled with these words, probabilistic and deterministic. And they get used in different. I mean, one of the criticisms of AI is that it's probabilistic. I have to be careful how to say that. And therefore you ask AI a question and it'll give you a different answer. Two good answers, but completely different answers to the same question. Whereas the financial markets want certainty. So how does AI play out in that context?
So I'll use an example. I had a client 3 months ago. They're running a very, very sophisticated agentic system, right? So not just asking it questions, it was taking action, getting data, processing the data, doing things with it. They had it connected to, I want to say 4 or 5 different data sources. And they were asking me very bluntly, it's mixing up data. It's crossing these things over, right? How can we stop that? What setting do I tweak to change this, right? And the answer was, you build it differently, right? So your deterministic point, right? In that case, what I told them was, you still need determinism in your system, right? Just because you can ask AI a question doesn't mean it's the best way to get the answer. And it doesn't mean the more information that agent has, the better it is. So for a vector database, right, that is going to store data and it's going to put it in there in a way that sort of maps the semantic meaning of that data, right? So it's going to say data that we think means the same thing as along this line or this line, and it can track that properly. So that way, when it looks something up, it knows what other data in the database may be relevant to that search. Okay. What I told them to do was each one of those different vectorized data sources needed to have its own agent that could only see it and only focus and specialize. So again, you want some determinism in your system so that you know that when I ask agent A about database A, it's not getting data from database C. So we still have to have determinism in these systems. AI is not the answer to every question. And every system you have will have deterministic, except it still needs to have software in it too. James, what do you, am I talking crazy here?
No, you're spot on. I mean, I think your comment of like, you've got to, change the way that you think about it, solving the problem. And I think this is just an artifact of how we've all started to adopt AI, right? Where, Chat GPT was the inflection point, whatever it was, like 2 months ago now, or 2 years ago, I should say, right? It was about 2 years ago, right? Chat GPT hit the world here, or 2.5 years ago. And we just chatted with it and we're like blown away by the power. And there is no construction at the initial stages of like the data set that it's operating on. Hey, this was trained on everything on the internet and it gives me, coherent answers. This is incredible. But you're not structuring what's actually happening. You're not directing it in a way that is deterministic. And I think that's the part of, what the evolution in the last, 9 months around when we start talking about agents, and agents being specific, having a persona, having a set of skills or a skill that they do really well. And then you're starting to tie that to the most important part of the equation is the enterprise data sources. And this has been the biggest struggle from security regulatory standpoint from an enterprise's perspective is how do I actually structure and then expose my enterprise data, my crown jewels, the information that's relevant to AI in a structured way. And I think that's the actual unlock of AI is that you're going to now develop agents. The agent is going to have access to a curated, well-defined data set that you've deemed, as the enterprise owner, that like this is the gold standard. It's what we want to base decisions on, and you're going to make, agent A, you're going to make these decisions, and agent B, you're going to make these decisions, and then we wire the agents together in a workflow that then we can drive the determinism in to say we're going to get a perspective from A, we're going to get a perspective from B, and then whether it's the human in the loop at the end that's going to say yes, this is what we want, or no, this is not what we want.
Guys, we got about 10 minutes to go, and I do want to I want to dwell a little bit on regulation and government, but I'll get you thinking about this. Where's Oracle going? In the next 6 months, 12 months, what's the story? I mean, Jason and I were joking at the London event recently that whatever he was going to talk about would be out of date. And maybe by the time we've talked about this, things are moving at such pace. So I'm curious where Oracle, how you're riding that wild horse. But let's talk about something less wild, more mundane maybe, but bloody important. Governments and regulation. I mean, they're regulating, as I understand it, things like DORA in the EU is operational resilience. They want the financial markets to be very resilient and robust. They sort of want them to be, I don't know, sort of fair. I don't know how much governments are putting the fairness of the market. They are worried a little bit about enormous companies and monopolies and things like that. They stick their nose into that. Again, I'm hitting you with a lot of things. From where you guys are sitting, what do you see governments currently doing, and what might they do in the next year or two? James? That's an easy question.
Sure. You didn't want to start with Jason on that one? Okay. Jason, do you think I'll talk off the top of my head? What are governments doing? I mean, I think, look, I'll say this. AI, the investment in AI, the use of AI is inevitable. So if you're sitting there as an enterprise and you're debating it, you're already losing. So it's a question of, and Jason can attest to this just in our own internal team, right? We've got, Oracle as a corporation has rules and regulations on things that we can do. We had to push the boundaries as a team to become effective, to learn, to, understand like what's the best fit for leveraging AI just within our team. So we had to act, we had to go and then work within the boundaries of where things are going. I think, so the biggest, and I said this already, I think the biggest thing from a government standpoint and a regulation standpoint that is going to continue to push is the sovereignty angle.
Yeah.
Data is going to, is going to be the most important commodity that's going to exist. I mean, it probably already is, but I think it's just AI is going to put that in, is going to just accelerate the value proposition of my data, the data set that I've curated that I'm working on as, a person, a company, a large enterprise, or a government, or a country itself. That's going to be the commodity that you control and own. So I need the boundaries around my data set to be sovereign, to be fully secure, is going to be of utmost priority, because that's going to be the driving force behind how I'm training my model. That's going to be my competitive differentiator. And again, if you look at like hedge funds, this is what they're most sort of like
I'm going to ask.
controlling over.
I'm going to
Yeah.
ask Jason a really awkward, nasty question. So yeah, James, what you said was so eloquent and so right and morally correct and brilliant. And Jason, then whoever is the president at the moment knocks on the door and he's got some heavy policemen behind him and says, I want all that data that came from David Anderson in the UK. And you said, but I promised David that I would keep it in safe and sovereign to David Anderson in the UK. And your policeman says, well, we'll put you in jail unless you give us that. I mean, I'm being a bit facetious, but
I actually have an answer, and Oracle has an answer on purpose, right? Sovereign data in sovereign locations doesn't flow outside of that location, right? So the answer might be love to, sir, right? I don't even know what's out. I don't know what David has. I don't want to know.
So you can't. It's not you won't. You can't.
Right. So it's the data is isolated to that location and doesn't flow out of that location for sovereign for that reason, right? I don't want to have government X ask me about government Y's location ever, or business A and business B.
So let's focus on a regulatory, slightly less contentious this resilience thing. I think on the cloud, I don't know what goes on in the US, but I think the EU are trying to say a big entity, a bigger organization must have at least two cloud providers. You can't be, and I think they're beginning to say you can't be dependent on one AI model. I mean, what are you guys hearing on that front? Is
cloud definitely, and that's one of the reasons we've pushed so hard as a business to be interconnected. So we have connectivity to all the other major cloud providers now, and we did that on purpose. We want you to run the workload you want where you want, but also if I'm back up to AWS somewhere or the other way around, we've got to be able to talk to each other freely and as quickly as possible. So we took the step to be the one to say, we're going to agree to connect to everybody else because we know across the world, we're going to have to back each other up. As odd as that is, we don't cheer when another cloud provider has an outage somewhere because that looks bad for everybody. That's a problem for everybody, right? So I think we're going to see a place where major regulatory agencies are going to require two clouds or more, probably two at first. There could be reasons to have more. And I say that because in the highest availability systems, you've got primary and a backup and a DR. Well, now I'm counting to three, right? So I can see that. Happening. Can I go back on the regulatory thing real quick? I play a lot with Claude. I can't use Fable right now at a government's request. Right. That I think is going to become more of a thing. These models are getting to be very powerful. And I don't know what all Mythos can do. I don't know.
I know. And then, look, this is getting a little bit political, but it's a bit of fun. I mean, there is, sitting here in the UK, I mean, most of the big tech companies, your good selves, are American. I mean, there's a massive concentration of that technical IT, AI, cloud power. It sits in the US. In fact, I'll throw in a not a flippant comment, but a serious question. China. I mean, what's going on with China? I mean, is it Alibaba? Is the Chinese cloud? I haven't really seen or heard much from that. Because I mean, are you allowed to operate in China? Or I know Google.
We don't have any sovereign China entities right now.
So it could. Well, maybe this is a segue into that final question. Where is all this going? What does the future hold? James, get your crystal ball out. What's going to happen in the rest of 26 and as we go into 27? I mean, I don't think we can look much further ahead. I mean, what is it? Artificial general intelligence, when the Terminator comes and we all get killed. We'll worry about that in 2030. But in the next year or so, what do you see coming, James? What should we look out for?
You're going to make me just look bad here. Maybe we'll edit this part out or something later in the podcast. So like when whatever I say next is like absolutely wrong, we'll just be able to like,
it's going to be
I'll clip it for
quoted
the
forever.
team party at Christmas. That's what we'll do.
I
exactly.
won't say his name, but one person I was chasing for a podcast said no, because I know whatever I say will then be there for posterity. So,
where are we going? I think this is, I'll start sort of, broadly. I think we're headed, this is the age of the entrepreneur. And I think there's massive, massive opportunities ahead for everyone listening to this podcast, the three of us here, to take advantage of, the AI wave, the ability to do things and build things that, just haven't been done before. It's where your imagination is your only limit. Your creativity is your only limit right now. So I think, one of the trends that's going to happen is we're going to see a boom in entrepreneurs and startup companies that are going to just be popping up everywhere that are solving, unique problems in unique ways that we hadn't thought of before. So tons and tons of opportunities are ahead of us, I think, just on the personal sort of like in the building side of it. So, it's the imperative is for my kids and for everyone here is like, we have to be builders. We have to be creative thinkers. And I think that's the imperative for change for all of us right now.
But is that, I don't know if the phrase translates to American English. The phrase a cottage industry, do you hear that phrase?
Yeah.
And also when you hear about car manufacturers going bankrupt, some of the British car manufacturers went under and they said, oh, that is 5,000 employees gone. But then they talked about all the other companies, the small companies that were servicing that big car plant. I mean, are there a myriad of small companies servicing Oracle? You've got Oracle, Google, Microsoft, but is there effectively an ecosystem of lots of small entrepreneurs, James, that are...
Absolutely. I mean, if you really look at our business and where it's growing from, like who's actually like the highest consumption running in our cloud, it's the ISV market. So the independent software developers, the builders out there. And it's incredible. The stories that you hear, it's like, oh, this company is building a robot that does X, Y, and Z, and they're training their model. They're doing this with AI in our cloud. And it's just like, wait, what are they doing? And what's their goal? It's incredible. And that's really the fastest moving segment for us. I think, that trend is only going to continue to accelerate. Like every model that comes out, like does something better, faster. So how do you actually take advantage of that? I think we've said it a bunch of times. I think the walled gardens and the sovereignty is just going to continue to be the discussion. The move to the edge, the idea of, your personal brand, your personal agent, maybe my bold claim is in our next podcast, let's do it in a year. It'll just be our agents will be representing us on the podcast. Let's
avatars. We'll have avatars.
Yeah. Absolutely. An avatar. It'll sound like me. It'll have my mannerisms.
Our avatars will be able to have a conversation. I mean, not scripted. They will. I bet they will. Got it. It's frightening.
Yeah. I think that's, where we're going to, that's where the
exciting and frightening. Yeah, exciting and frightening. I mean, James, I'll start with Jason. We're literally a couple of minutes towards the end. So final thoughts, things that you wished you'd said that David never let you say.
I don't know.
The big final.
So, okay, let me.
Jason, are you there? We might have lost Jason right at the end.
That's all we got was 58 minutes.
Yeah, well, So James, it relies on you to bring us home.
Sure.
So the final.
So what didn't I say? What are the final thoughts? I think the one thing that I didn't say, and tied into the question around around resiliency and multi-cloud and how do we actually build for the future. I think the cautionary tale or the message for the builders that are out there and anybody that's on this journey is avoiding the technical debt of proprietary solutions. Everything is moving so fast that if you're making a bet on a specific technology, hey Jason, that bet could be wrong. And you don't want to be caught in a scenario where, one, you've built on something proprietary that is limited to one cloud. So if regulation does change, you're now refactoring to sort of get off of that cloud or build it in a more open way. And two, as the latest and greatest model or the latest and greatest, agent framework or tool comes available, building towards open standards today is going to set you up for success and flexibility in the future. I think that's really the point. And I think it's a challenge that I see a lot of enterprises, a lot of capital markets companies making right now, that it's going to be a pain for them in the future, because they're choosing the easy path of like, hey, this is already here and I can just, click the button and it works. And like Copilot, not to pick on any solutions, I mean, it's great, but it only runs in one place and you're tied into some very specific, way of doing things that if you're running an enterprise and you want to be, maintain your flexibility and continue to enhance your capabilities going forward, you've got to focus on what are the open standards, what are the open roadways between clouds for me to deploy this anywhere, and avoid that heavy weight of technical debt that could happen if you're, picking the, proprietary solutions.
And I've heard a lot of small companies out there, we won't mention names, but I'm sure you've heard them talking about this and having a go at the sort of major players. And I worked for Reuters in the 90s, and we constantly strived to be sticky because it was good for us to be sticky. But it was, from the customer's perspective, they didn't really, like that. So, Jason, we lost you for a couple of minutes, but you're back. Final comments, the future, something you wish you'd said. And now your microphone, Jason, you might. I think we've had technical. Yeah, hang on. You there? Yes.
No better? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
that's it.
Apologize. I was going to add on to what James said, actually. So I think right now, enterprises are going to get this figured out, and this being how to use AI. But because of the politics in enterprises, they're going to be slower. So there's a chance here for smaller players, individuals and smaller players, to make bold bets and take a shot at some things, because the enterprises are rightfully nervous about certain areas and they can't move as fast. Right. I think that over the next year or two, we're, Fable and Mythos are the first generation of the newest set of models that come out. We've got probably 2 or 3 more yet this year that are going to be of the same quality, of the same number of GPUs used to train them, the same number of parameters. That's going to get interesting over the next 6 months. I do think for our next podcast, our agents will at minimum find the date and time without ever having to ask us. Yours will just say, you want to talk to us again? And I was like, oh yeah, here. I'll wake up one morning and be told to put a shirt on, right? We'll figure this out, right?
Yeah, the future is going to be quite different. It's slightly less important for me as my venerable 68 years as I slip into semi-retirement. But I'm not retiring. I'm hanging around for a bit longer, so everybody will be stuck with me. Look, James, Jason, this has been a pleasure. I apologize it took us such a long time to get this organized, but it has been the pleasure I expected it to be. It's been a pleasure working with Oracle over the last couple of years. A fresh new face in the market data industry, and it's been great. So thank you, James. Thank you, Jason. I'm going to stop the recording